TopMedTalk.
Well, hello. It's TopMedTalk at Anesthesiology 2022 here in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm Desiree Chappell, your host. I'm joined by my co-host, Professor Monty Mythen and Professor Saul Aronson. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Desiree.
Good morning, Desiree.
I love those words. Every time I don't get tired of hearing it. Monty, how's it been going for you? We've caught up with Saul a little bit today, but you've been a busy bee.
It's been hectic, but it's been great. It's been wonderful.
Yeah. Great presentation yesterday morning.
Thank you. It was a group presentation all about hemodynamic instability and how prevalent it is, but a great collaboration between your organization, NorthStar, and US Anesthesia partners. So more about that at the lunchtime session, which I think you're presenting.
Yes, I am, along with my colleague, Professor Mike Scott.
There we go.
Yeah, from UPenn. So that should be fun. I'm excited about that.
And he's got some late-breaking news that maybe we'll be able to share later.
Yes, I know. I'm very, very excited. I'm just going to say something about AKI. It's a little teaser there. Saul, great meeting so far?
Love it.
Yeah, lots of great conversations.
Good conversation.
Cool people.
Good people. New Orleans is a easy place to enjoy yourself.
It's a tough place to actually be in for a conference when you're trying to get up at 6 a.m. So I'm so excited about our next guest. It is a dear friend of mine, but also a colleague with NorthStar Anesthesia. So many of you listening may not know I'm actually Vice President of Clinical Quality for NorthStar Anesthesia. I'm a CRNA also in Louisville, Kentucky. But I am so excited for our next guest, Dr. Mark Pinosky, who is one of our physician leaders within our organization. Mark, thanks so much for sitting down with us.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great. You know, nobody has more energy than Desiree, right? I'm just inspired by everything that you show up every day, whether it's in the OR or what you do for us at NorthStar and, again, TopMedTalk. So glad to be here.
It is actually really fun to be at this meeting as TopMedTalk, wearing my other hat. I'm, of course, still wearing my NorthStar hat, but for you guys to kind of see me in action in a whole another way. So
awesome.
I'm glad for that. Well, Mark, just kind of diving right in. Well, actually, what I want to do first is tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you practice, and your role within NorthStar.
Yeah, sure. So Mark Pinosky, I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, where I live with my wife of 31 years. And thanks. I got two children now in Cleveland and Chicago, kind of your way. So that's kind of who I am. Started my career in academics at the Medical University of South Carolina, spending about 9 years in cardiac anesthesia, pediatric cardiac, and then pivoted about the last 20 years and got into the private sector with a real focus over the last 8 years in NorthStar Anesthesia. And so it's really been able to see how we impact, pretty much 80% of the anesthesiologists that are out there really practice in the private sector. So that's really what I do now is I'm Regional Chief Medical Officer for NorthStar Anesthesia, Vice President of Physician Services. So keeps me busy covering the East Coast. So yeah, it's fun.
Absolutely. Well, we on TopMedTalk, even before actually COVID and the whole situation over the last couple of years. I know I wasn't supposed to say COVID, but here we are. We on TopMedTalk have had a lot of conversations about wellness of anesthesia providers, specifically, well-being. We actually had a wonderful conversation with Bob Booth, who is a former colleague of ours at NorthStar, about that. A great conversation with Sasha Shilcutt at the SCA.
And
Chorvey Perry. Phenomenal conversations at TopMedTalk.com. So you can check them out there. COVID has changed a lot. Where are we right now in the profession of anesthesia when it comes to provider well-being?
Well, I think it's a great point. COVID really, this wasn't a new phenomenon, burnout. It's something that's been around, and it dates all the way back to the 1800s and 1900s, where the desire was really to have a well-rounded physician. Before wellness, we talk about wellness is really the physician taking care of themselves, the provider taking care of themselves. So physician, heal thyself, as opposed to, yoga your way out of it was kind of the thought. Mindfulness, all very, very important. However, what we're really seeing is that COVID exposed some of the cracks that exist in that support of our physicians. And I think one of the things that's made it really fun for me now, as being on the private practice side, is there's so many wonderful people, Amy Vincent and Florence LaCroix, all people that are academically driven, just have provided a qualitative problem and given a quantitative support, which I think is so critical. But now let's look at what's happening in the private sector and what are we doing to combat some of the challenges we're facing. So
to dive down into that, I mean, we can talk about the Great Resignation and the crisis of staffing,
sure.
Highlighted by the external pressures on the specialty itself that are independent, if you will, of the day-to-day wellness. How do you identify? How do you address that in the private world where you still got to keep the trains running on time?
Well, that's true. So one of the things that happened in 2018, NorthStar Anesthesia, along with our financial partner Cranemere, which is a holding company, allowed us to reinvest in our company. And through our leadership and Adam Spiegel, who is our CEO, who I have to mention to make sure.
I know. I think he's around here. The booth, NorthStar booth is literally adjacent to us.
So we maintain jobs, right? We want to make
exactly.
Adam, who was that again?
Adam Spiegel.
Adam Spiegel.
Nice guy.
Oh, the Adam Spiegel.
The Adam Spiegel. But what we did is we saw that it was such a critical investment in our teams to be engaging our people. So through engagement surveys, giving our team the tools and the skill sets so they can attack at the individual level. So one of the studies that just came out of the Committee for Wellbeing, which I have the great fortune of being on with the likes of Amy Vincent and just tremendous work that they're doing, or we're doing. We just came out with an approved last year, the policy towards looking at this as an organizational problem, as a systems problem, rather than just individual. So long-winded answer to you, Saul, is that we at NorthStar, for instance, we've invested heavily in engagement survey. One of the things that we have found, what keeps people engaged in their jobs, wanting to stay, is if they feel that they are supported and that they're by their institution. So whether that's the hospital, whether it's an ASC, or whether it's NorthStar Anesthesia, we want to make sure that our people know that, number one, we're hearing them. So listen first is one of our values.
Absolutely. So,
go ahead, Monty.
I was going to say, so because I experienced a similar exercise back in the UK, the hospital that I worked at, and one of the things that came out of the reports from that is you can't predict people's stressors that are leading them towards possible burnout. They might turn around and say, I'm very happy to do a long day, but there are Tuesday and Thursday, for example, it's my turn to pick the kids up. And every time I miss that target and get that added stressor, that's driving my burnout. Whereas for someone else, it's where they keep their bike safely.
And the problem is nobody's going to know it's your burnout until it starts to manifest way after you're way down the structure. So, and then we actually reward the poor behavior. Yeah. So, Monty, thanks for still working 40 hours this last 2 weeks. That's a great job. I mean, that's probably the wrong answer, right?
Yeah.
So, what we've kind of invested in, you can't just, survey people to death. Yeah. And if they don't see a response and see that the company is listening, or that the hospital or the ASC is listening, and that there's some change that's occurring, that's how you finally get engagement. And what they found, or what we found in this recent study that Amy Vincent was part of, that looked at, if people feel like they're not engaged at work, they have a 10-fold increased risk of experiencing burnout.
What are the unique stressors in the field of anesthesia that drive burnout, if you will, differentiated from other providers within the broader spectrum of healthcare?
Yeah, I have great question, Saul, because if you really look at it, in and of itself, anesthesia is a high-stress environment, right? So we're isolated, we're behind the screen by ourselves. We often don't have control either of our schedule or of what our surgical colleague is doing. What's happening on the other side of the ether screen. So there's an inherent stress. We often take over responsibility for things that we don't have control, and then too often, one of the questions is, if you want to know who the pilot in the room is, just wait, he'll tell you. So part of and I am.
And I was saying Mark's the pilot.
So one of the things that we do a really poor job of in anesthesia compared to what we do in the aviation community is, if you have an event, you want to debrief and make sure that you've had a chance to decompress from that. And what happens is we just have depersonalized the way we approach our patients often, or the way that we approach each other. So that's one of the big things with burnout. So it's depersonalization, emotional exhaustion, and then feeling like you don't really control. There's a lack of personal satisfaction.
And how do we reach beyond the screen, if you will, to use a metaphor, or objective reality, to invite those other cultures, those other people in the room to sort of own the problem and be a part of the solution, because it's not siloed.
No, you're right, but in your world, right, it's all about the money, isn't it? I mean, that really what we learned is that the way that you were able to affect a lot of the changes through the perioperative continuum is to show that there's a financial gain by making these kind of change or a culture of caring, so to speak, or a culture of well-being. And the way if you look back to 1999, the air is human, that impacted us. That who would have thought that there was a chief quality officer now, right?
Yeah.
Or that we have an EMR that has generated all kind of problems or challenges for us. So just like that occurred, COVID has created this next event where people are just not going to tolerate this isolation, the burnout, because it's a financial burden on healthcare. It's a financial burden on they said there was something on the order of greater than $4 billion that is lost because of burnout and the loss of providers.
It's a really good point, Mark, that if you think about the traditional sort of pro forma, that how do you build processes or systems to enhance value or reduce costs? And we think about that in our ledgers and our spreadsheets. But there's a component, I would presume, this is an invitation for a question, of just recruitment and retention. The sort of provider satisfaction as a consequence of doing the right thing. And every time somebody leaves, the cost of that is a phenomenal burden.
Absolutely, right? So we're being asked to do more with less, and so that just compounds the problem when we can't retain good people. So one of the it's easy to live the values that we do in our organization. It's listen first, and while we're patient-centric, we're provider-focused. And what that really means is that we have leadership at the ground level that is empowered and held accountable to make sure that their team is whole, because having that peer-to-peer support structure is what really starts to bond. And so it's sometimes the low-hanging fruit, right? Mm-hmm. Are you getting, and I think Bob probably shared with you last year, just the tool set to check in, right? And it's talking about, what's challenging you today? What gives you hope? What, and what emotionally, or how are you doing as a team? And then the C and the K, and kind of remembering here. But what are some of the things that I should know about? And then finally, what is something that you're celebrating right now? So it should be, good wrapped around some of the challenges. So I know I kind of messed up a little check there.
No. That's
but the point is that the local to each layer along our structure has a responsibility to support and identify problems before they become endemic.
And again, Mark said it again: patient-centered.
We're patient-centered and provider-focused.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah. A little key phrase here. Mark, switching gears just a little bit. We talk a lot about burnout and wellness within the greater context of anesthesia providers. And there's a lot of thought that it's only, one group of people, one type of person. Is it a male, female, older, younger? Has there been much work or that you know of that really is determining who is at more risk of having burnout and well-being? I can't talk.
That's right. So a couple of things. So yes, there's a lot of work being done now, and I think one of the challenges is that there is no set criteria. Certainly, as we become a more diverse and inclusive community, it's those individuals that are at most risk, the LGBT community, and that are physicians that are the more likely to be subject to that depersonalization, and therefore leads to burnout or emotional exhaustion. So those are the people that are at great risk. Actually, anesthesia and physicians are considered to be highly resilient, but yet we're still subject to the risk of burnout. And in fact, unfortunately, the incidence of suicide or suicidal ideations is still very, very high in both anesthesia and surgeons who is really our world.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Mark, where do you feel like we're going in this space? How, and not necessarily as NorthStar, but just in the general anesthesia world, like where are we moving? How can we make this better? I mean, that's a big question to answer, but what are some of the techniques? I know you said like check in and making sure you're communicating effectively with your teams.
Absolutely. So part of it is if we can demonstrate, so there's the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. You want to have those things if it's getting breaks or if it's getting lunches or making sure that people are being taken care of. But having a a situation where people can report bullying or any untoward events, that they're treated to make a safe work environment, and putting that in partnership with our hospital partners or ASC partners. What I think, providing to them that, hey, why should I have a chief quality officer? Every hospital has a chief quality officer now. Now the next interim after this will be, should I have a chief wellness, a well-being officer? And I think that's going to be the next pivot that we'll see because of COVID that kind of accentuated.
Yeah, I think we will be seeing a lot of that.
I've been involved in some panels recently. We had one actually there in our Ireland meeting that included representation from Australia, the USA, and a clinical psychologist and a broad group of people. And the key thing that seemed to come out was the first component, like classical medicine, is diagnosis precedes treatment. Now, it can't be diagnosed because it's not a disease, was the conclusion, but it's a phenomenon that we have to recognize is very damaging. Therefore, we have to improve our capture of recognizing it.
Right.
How do we do that?
So through different vehicles, so both on the local level, checking in, having engagement surveys that are really geared towards making sure that you're engaged with your organization, and then identifying when there's things that are being done positively and when they're done negatively, and most importantly, that that our individual healthcare workers, and in this case anesthesiologists and anesthetists, that they feel that not only are they being heard, but action is occurring.
Yes.
And so that's such the critical end loop to make sure that we're going to have success. I do have to shout out, I just came back from Ireland for a boys' golf trip, and it was absolutely phenomenal.
Isn't it one of the most amazing places in the world?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It is. I'm just
We're not biased.
And there's a wonderful meeting there every year.
There is.
I understand from EPOM,
Yeah, at Palm Dingle, you'll have to come over and combine with the golf trip next time.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
And if my wife's watching, please, is that okay?
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, but definitely a plug for Carrie and our meeting there at Dingle.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us. Is there anything else that we kind of wanted to, that you wanted a final point you wanted to address?
No, I think this is such an important topic, and it impacts all of us. This is the supply-demand issue is such a critical time right now, and working as one team with the ORs, working with our surgical colleagues, is how we're going to get to this to be safe.
And Mark, any signposting to any particular resource that?
Yeah, so if you, that's a great point. So the ASA HQ has a great, if you hit the tab on physician well-being, it allows for not just what we're accomplishing now, but some resources there for suicide prevention, all that drug diversion stuff. So all right there, great resource.
Yeah, and I think we actually had some podcasts about that last year. So if you wanted to listen to it at TopMedTalk.com, you can go back and listen to those previous conversations from the ASA. So, Mark, it was so wonderful.
So fun to sit down with you anytime.
That's right.
And great seeing you all again. Thank you again for the Morpheus Consortium, which I was the great benefactor of doing the cohort. Many years.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for watching Top Med Talk here at Anesthesiology 2022.
Top Med Talk. Thanks for downloading Top Med Talk. Don't forget to subscribe via your podcatcher. Don't forget to check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And also, don't forget, Top Med Talk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that. If you check out ebpom.org, you can find low prices on some of the conferences we're organising around the world. Many of them are virtual and don't even involve you leaving your own home. Check out ebpom.org now.